In 2018, South Park released a two-part episode, where the B story revolves around many of the characters in town being hooked on Red Dead Redemption 2. There were tons of accurate references dropped into the script, leaving little doubt that Matt Stone and Trey Parker were loving their time with the game. There's also, however, a scene where one of the characters finds out that his wife has been playing on his game save. In response to this heinous betrayal, he announces that he's going to start a new save game, and in disbelief, his wife remarks that he couldn't possibly go all the way back to the snow level again. The thing is, Red Dead 2 is a meticulously crafted masterpiece, with an opening section that very smartly sets the pace and tone for the rest of the game. And yet, every one of us who caught this scene felt the remarks about repeating that same snow level in the pits of our very souls. The snowy intro level is slow and deliberate, and arguably a great example of a protracted prologue that is done right. Which begs the question, if a good prologue can be this contentious, then what happens when a game gets it wrong? When those opening moments drag their feet, pile on the tutorials, and keep you away from the good stuff for far too long. In a world where so much content is front-loaded with carefully curated, snappy first impressions, why are some developers still trying to start their games with an exercise in patience? Welcome to the Protracted Prologue paradox. Okay, so before we get into this, let's define what we're talking about. A protracted prologue is when a game starts in such a way that it holds the player back from the core gameplay experience. When a game wrestles control away from you, pumps the brakes on any momentum you might be feeling, or overwhelms you with exposition, the only thing this amounts to is delaying true player agency. The paradox lies in the intent. Longer opening sequences have the chance to forge a deeper connection between the player and the game world, to really invest you in the characters and their story, and to smartly introduce you to multi-layered mechanics that would be too much to absorb if they were all presented outright. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither were the mechanics of a 100-hour-long JRPG. Research into gaming psychology has shown that player engagement is often locked in during the first 10 to 30 minutes, when the brain is in a high state of curiosity and primed for learning and rewards. To put this another way, first impressions matter. When someone recommends a game to you with the caveat that it doesn't really start properly until so many hours into the game, that's fine, as long as those opening hours are actually good. Unskippable cutscenes and endless pop-ups have never really been the smart play to make here, something ironically pointed out by Ubisoft back in 2013. I know, it's kinda trite to poke fun at Ubisoft these days, but Blood Dragon did it so well, and they used one of my childhood heroes to do it. My hands were kinda tied here when you think about it.
Just let me kill people, damn it.
The good intentions behind this paradox will only get you so far though. If an idea never works, then people will stop using it. So you have to figure that some games must have gotten this protracted prologue thing right. Well, we touched on Red Dead 2 and how it was slow and deliberate, and if nothing else, certainly divisive among the fanbase. So why did I say that it had been done right? Well, for one thing, it ticks all of the boxes. It expertly blends brilliant performances with a gripping narrative and cinematic delivery. It introduces mechanics to you organically by tying them to different missions, and it sets your expectations for the rest of the game by mixing up your activities. You'll carefully hunt a deer, wage war on a rival gang, and top it all off with a great train robbery, all before you see even a hint of green in all of that snow. The main issue that people had is that the opening section feels slow, glacial, if you will. And it is. Outside of winter sports, there are no activities that get faster in the snow. The reason why this worked is because Red Dead 2 is, once again, a slow and deliberate game. And right from the start, the developers found a way to slow us down. Rockstar set the pace that we had to work with, and they made no apology for it. Just like the Souls games are unapologetic with their difficulty from the word go. A protracted prologue doesn't always have to fit inside an open world epic though. There are plenty of games you can finish inside of a week that manage to get the balance just right. Arkham Asylum gradually guided you into the belly of the beast before teaching you just enough combat to get you started. BioShock did the same thing whilst luring you into one of the most unique and horrifying settings in all of gaming. And The Last of Us opened up with a slow burn of tension and atmosphere that erupted into absolute chaos. The Last of Us in particular was a brilliant setup because it used a technique called emotional priming to evoke a connection between we the player and the main character. When you're asking the player to endure a world that is this bleak, your chances increase massively when they feel a connection to the characters. And I don't know about you, but I just had to know that Joel and Ellie were gonna be okay.
Hey there.
So, how does one actually put together a successful protracted prologue then? Well, as best I can tell, you need to invest the player in the story and you need to teach them how to navigate it. And there are a myriad of examples of games that got this right. Final Fantasy VII drops you in the thick of an action-packed mission, and so does Nier Automata, and they both manage to nail the balance of gameplay and exposition, albeit very differently.
Okay, that was pretty cool.
Heck, even Hideo Kojima finally seems to have figured out how to get this balance right. But players don't just want the same formula over and over. We want new games to feel new and to excite us all over again. And whilst the reality is that often we are getting the same formulas repackaged and resold to us, we're okay with it as long as they're done well. To hopefully explain this a little better, I want to break down the opening of a game that is largely agreed to be near perfect, but at first glance seems like it has gotten literally everything wrong.
Let's do this, senpai!
So, straight away, Persona 5's opening sequence seems like textbook excess, the very definition of a protracted prologue. After a stylish intro with some brief combat, the pace almost grinds to a halt.
True.
And the opening hours become a dense mix of cutscenes, tutorials, and scripted sequences. You are looking at a minimum of 3 hours before you're let loose on the first palace with full gameplay freedom. And yet, despite all of this, the introduction to Persona 5 is a masterclass in gradual, purposeful design, and one of the best openings I have ever seen.
Phrasing?
To begin with, you feel confined. Your movements are restricted, your choices limited, and your daily life is heavily scripted. You're introduced to the people who become your teammates and confidants, but every one of them appears to be stuck somehow, going through the motions and trapped in prisons of their own. However, despite the slow pacing, nothing feels forced or drawn out. Even with all of the scripting and hand-holding, not a single scene feels wasted. The mystery quickly begins to pick up steam, drawing in more people, unlocking gameplay mechanics and expanding your player agency, when suddenly, a genuinely shocking story event stops you dead and you are powerless to stop it. You can't be held back anymore. The inciting event was too much. The game has to let you loose. And then it does. And it has been cleverly teaching you everything that you needed to know this whole time. Being allowed to run free feels like you're finally able to fill your lungs with air. And everything you now understand creates a rich and rewarding gameplay loop. Persona 5 earns the right to use a protracted prologue by using its length with intention rather than indulgence. So many JRPGs start with a flash forward followed by a slower pace and a deluge of tutorials, but Persona 5 makes every second count. Instead of just sticking a pop-up about healing items on your screen, you strike a deal with a local doctor, because realistically, where else would you get healing items from? Everything is introduced organically as part of the story, and you never feel like a new lesson is breaking your immersion. Heck, even when Mona explains the metaverse in true JRPG ridiculousness, the game balances this out in ways like Ryuji changing the subject and asking Mona why they're a talking cat.
Why can you talk? You're a cat!
So yeah, the formulas are fine as long as they engage the player. Oh, and as long as they don't just keep repeating the same winning formulas. If you compare Persona 5 to Metaphor, for example, you'll be relieved to see that Atlus didn't rest on their laurels. With so many examples out there of how to get a Protracted Prologue right, one has to wonder how some games manage to get things so spectacularly wrong. And as easy as it would be to pick apart games considered to be bad, I'm more interested in how games that are otherwise good manage to kill their audience before they'd even got started.
Come on. Quit playing around and fight.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not a fan of expecting one thing in a game and then getting another, especially when it takes forever to make its point. I will always have fond memories of, say, 95% of Kingdom Hearts 2, but literally no part of me ever wants to replay Twilight Town. Hardly anything happens story-wise that is of any real consequence. Each day is just another glitch in the Matrix. The whole Roxas plot doesn't come full circle until the end of the game, and honestly, you'd be forgiven if you missed it. When a prologue takes too damn long to let you access the core of the game, that is unforgivable. Now sometimes, the decision to open the game with a different character can actually have a point, and it can feature ample amounts of solid gameplay, it can move at a decent pace, and even end on a plot twist that not everyone saw coming, and still manage to get it wrong.
Wait, what?
The opening of Assassin's Creed 3 was divisive if nothing else, but arguably executed much better than Twilight Town. The issue that I had with it, however, was what it did to the pacing. When you give up control of Haytham, Connor is a child in the woods learning the basics of hunting, and you have to go through all of this early life before being allowed to roam free. It felt like starting the game all over again. Any momentum I was feeling was stopped dead, and if I wasn't determined to see how Desmond was going to stop the world from ending, I'm not sure I would have continued. Now, in both of these cases, you're looking at maybe 5 hours, which is rough, but can you imagine if a game took, I don't know, upwards of 20 hours to let you access the game proper? I mean, that would be ridiculous, right? If you don't recognize this scene, I don't blame you. According to Steam, less than 30% of players made it this far in Final Fantasy XIII. Grand Pulse is where the game finally opens up, but you won't set foot here until Chapter 11, in a game made up of 13 chapters. After a bombastic and encouraging opening scene, which features an arrival by train and a scorpion boss for some reason, the pace slows to a complete crawl, and the combat might seem flashy, but it's actually extremely basic. In Chapter 3, you're introduced to magic and the paradigm system, which is a lot more fun and satisfying to experiment with, but so much of it is still walled off until much, much later in the game. Final Fantasy XIII committed every cardinal sin when it comes to the Protracted Prologue. Limited freedom, endless exposition, painfully slow unlocks, and melodramatic dialogue. The conflict between Snow and Hope, and yes, those are their real names, being probably the worst offender. All of which is a shame, because I really enjoyed this game once it took off the training wheels and the characters got over their drama. So, with all of that being said, why do developers invest so much into such a risky style of opening? And with so many case studies of successes and failures ripe for study, why does this paradox still exist? Well, we've talked a lot about the two main practical reasons, which are mechanical complexity and narrative ambition. When you have a complex game, it's worth taking that extra time to introduce the mechanics in a scaffolded way. If you give players new things to try organically, there's a greater chance that players will absorb them and find them fun. All of this amounts to nothing though if the player is bored, and this is where the narrative needs to aim high, where the writers can craft a compelling and meaningful story and deliver it with cinematic flair. On paper, it sounds so simple, but the balance has to be perfect. Just like mechanics mean nothing if the player doesn't care why they're using them, taking control away from the player to deliver dialogue needs to justify itself with good dialogue.
There you are. Miss me? You, the monster! Where?
And this is not as easy to get right as it might first seem. Which leads me to a major driving force behind the paradox: video game publishers. Stakeholders like to look at data, and if they see that players are engaging with their games and playing for longer, then this is a good thing. The problem is how often this leads to the wrong question. How do we make our players play for longer? Instead of, how do we make them want to? If this happens when a game like Persona 5 or Red Dead 2 is performing well, then someone is bound to say, hey, why don't we have a really long tutorial too? But this is dangerous without understanding the context or expectations aligned with certain types of games. A longer intro is almost expected with a JRPG, but a shooter bogged down by pop-ups is just annoying.
Are these tutorials getting in the way of your mayhem?
In reality, this conversation is far more complex than copying a trend out of context. And to be fair, I've only really given one example. But what I can say with near certainty is that games that fail to engage are usually born from a risk-averse strategy. If you build something out of fear, it's probably going to show in the end product. If you build something out of trust, however, that shows too, and you stand a far greater chance of truly engaging with your audience. Now, just for fun, let's consider the alternative. In recent years, one trend that has become particularly noteworthy is supporting player autonomy. Games that tell us just enough to find our feet and let us loose within a matter of minutes. The great thing about this approach is that it can result in one of the purest forms of player agency, where we continue playing not because the story is telling us to, but because we want to. In Doom 2016, it takes exactly 30 seconds for the Doomslayer to smash their first demon's skull and put a gun in your hand. Everybody loves the bit where the sinister-sounding facility director starts trying to talk at him, and the Doomslayer famously smashes the monitor. But for my money, I prefer the part that comes after this, when the same guy tries to reason that he did what he did to help mankind, at which point our hero silently glances down at a fresh corpse before smashing the intercom.
But it was worth the risk, I assure you.
The Doomslayer doesn't need a reason. He just wants to kill demons, and now so do you. And just so we're clear here, guys, this isn't me saying that shorter introductions are the superior way to start a game. Every method has the potential to fail, and far too many games have gone down the shorter route and failed to stick the landing, but that's a topic for another video. The opening of a game is a promise to the player. This is what you can expect from the rest of the game. If a game uses this space to build a world, guide our hand, and forge connections between us and the characters, most players won't care how long it takes to do that. If you only take away one thing from the Protracted Prologue paradox, let it be this. It doesn't matter how you build your game. What matters is that it respects the one thing a player can never get back, and that is their time. Thank you so much for watching, my guys. And if you're wondering about these amazing people on screen right now, they all support me via my YouTube membership, which is like Patreon except you don't need to make another account. And if you'd like to support me too, you can join for just £2 a month. As always, my friends, my deep and heartfelt thanks to every one of you. See you on the next one.